I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table. Woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday. Dennis and I were so excited about the weekend that we decided to jump on about 10 minutes early. You're welcome, America. You know who else probably wasn't as excited to be launching into this Friday morning is the Washington Commanders, who, a couple weeks ago, they were 7-2. We were getting real excited. They had that heartbreaking loss to the Steelers on Sunday, and then last night with a lead into the fourth quarter, just got lost, kind of going away, 26-18. Not a great night for Jaden Daniels. Dennis, what do you think we learned about the Commanders last night?
So what we learned, and we talked about it, let me go find the notes from the last show, because we talked about it when we ended the show last week. So Philadelphia is just better at every position, whether it's running back or wide receiver or quarterback, tight end. Their offense is better, their defense is better, and Washington is on the up. They're coming up, they're growing. The downside of it is I wish I could remember. Let me see if it's I found a tweet that kind of encaps, or not, it wasn't a tweet. I'm not sure what they call it over on Blue Sky.
Skywriting message?
Yeah, something. It was Ted Gwynn, and he was talking about he had retweeted refleeted somebody. Let me find it here. So he said the reasons why, this guy posted a graphic about Cliff Kingsbury's offenses, and Ted replied, reasons why Cliff's offenses have fallen off a cliff later in the season. One, quarterback has too much of a burden as a runner, and his health goes down as the season gets longer because the quarterback's taking a beating. Defenses simply catch up with the simplicity of the offense. Theoretically, the defenses start catching up to their no-huddle communication. So maybe teams start to figure out what they're doing when they're not huddling. And the guy actually showed a nice little chart where early in the season, the production's up here, and then it comes down, and it's been going on for like 5 or 6 years with Kings. As the season goes on, his offense starts to falter. It wasn't a great night. If you had Austin Eckler, you did all right. Daniels didn't put up big numbers. Terry McLaurin, I like the parts that they have, but they just were simply playing a better team. And when that happens, everything has to be perfect. And it wasn't last night. And Philadelphia just was able to pull away.
Yeah, 2 targets, 1 reception, 10 yards. That's not only the stat line for Olamide Zaccheaus, which would be okay. That's also the exact same stat line for Terry McLaurin. They weren't able to really go down the field. You have 9 targets for Eckler, which are going to be dump offs. You have 7 for Ertz, which are mostly short over the middle. 3 for John Bates. Why Noah Brown got more targets than Terry McLaurin is a mystery, but if it hadn't been for
I
that
love
kind
Noah
of
Brown.
garbage time touchdown he got to Ertz, Jaden Daniels would have been single digits, which is a little rough. So hopefully, it'll
I mean,
pick up.
Kingsbury has to, if he's gonna be one of these glamour boys, he's got to learn how to stay up all night. Let me kill Mister. The basis that comes in hot, stays hot all night. He's gonna be there when the sun comes up, still rocking. Cliff has to kind of get some of that. He's drinking his White Claws and running out of steam. Lemmy's mainlining speed and drinking Jack Daniels straight from the bottle at 5 a.m. when the sun comes up. Cliff needs more of that.
Meanwhile, Saquon now, he had a monster fourth quarter, including a couple of huge breakaway touchdown runs. He's now got 1,137 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns there, 23 for 210 and 2 touchdowns in the passing game. Should he be among the MVP candidates?
I mean, he should be, but he's a running back, and so he's not going to probably get it.
I mean, they've been talking about Derrick Henry being an MVP candidate all season, and I would argue that Saquon makes more of a difference in Philly almost than Derrick Henry did.
I don't have anything great to refute that. The downside is that Hurts just takes so many touchdowns away from Saquon. If Saquon got more Saquon isn't getting the.
He's going to have to run it from 35 yards out like he did last night.
And he's not going to be able to do that every week. But Saquon is a great all-around back. He always has been. He's gotten dinged up and had some injuries. He's been on some piss poor teams in New York. He's in a position now where if he stays healthy and can keep producing like he is, then I think he should be considered. I'm not sure, who. Right now, Lamar is the front runner, and if the Ravens keep playing as well as they are on offense, I think he's going to win it again. And part of what Lamar has going on too is their defense isn't great, and so he has to put up points.
Yep. All right, well, let's get on to the rest of the Week 11 preview. There are some really huge matchups this week. First is a pretty big divisional matchup: the 6-3 Green Bay Packers at the 4-5 Chicago Bears, part of a big 3-game homestand for the Bears. Packers coming off that bye. Jaden Reed, we've seen him have some huge games and kind of disappear a little bit at times. There's a lot of competition. Most people still feel like he's kind of the number one there in Green Bay. But what does number one in Green Bay mean? Do you have him kind of top 12, top 24? How do you feel about Jaden Reed?
So Jaden Reed is sitting at wide receiver 13 on the year. He's been the wide receiver 1 in 1 week and the wide receiver 2 in another week. And then he has 6 weeks under 10 points in a PPR. It's not great. It's the challenge with Green Bay is they've got 4 pretty good receivers. And so if something isn't working, they can go somewhere else. Then they've got Josh Jacobs, who's, having a really good year at the running back position, and Tucker Kraft at tight end is having a really good year. Christian Watson is probably the most talented receiver on that team, but his health issues are keeping him from any kind of, elite level production on a consistent basis. Romeo Doubs, since his suspension for being a pain in the ass, he's kind of piped down and played really well. And then whenever Watson's out, Dontavian Wicks steps into his role and typically performs pretty well. So there's a lot of mouths to feed. I'm okay with Jaden Reed as a wide receiver too, and understanding there's going to be some days, but the way they use him, where they give him carries, he has opportunities to run the ball. They manufacture touches for him more so than any of the other receivers on that team. he's often compared to what San Fran does with Deebo Samuel. I don't know if that's fair to him or not, but that's who people like to compare him to. I like Reed. I just like him to be a little more consistent.
For the Bears, they made a change at offensive play caller and offensive coordinator this week, but they are going to be without three offensive linemen, and one guard is on injured reserve. A tackle and another guard are out this week. What are you expecting from this offense?
Man, I don't know. For a team that had their issue was always going to be the offensive line. It needed to come together. Early in the season, it struggled. Then it kind of gelled, and then it got injured. With their stable of wide receivers and what's been a healthy DeAndre Swift, they should be able to put up good numbers for fantasy football and real life football. It just hasn't worked out that well, and primarily because of the offensive line. And Caleb Williams still hasn't quite learned the difference between being an NFL quarterback and being a college quarterback. You got to get rid of the ball in the NFL. That being said, the new guy taking charge of the offense there, Thomas Brown, I'm not sure if he's got pictures of somebody or anything, but last year in Carolina, Frank Reich was the play caller for the first 6 games, in which Carolina averaged 18.6 points per game. Then that wasn't good enough, so Thomas Brown took over. And for the next 5 games until Frank Reich was fired, they proceeded to average 12.2 points per game under Thomas Brown. So I don't know that I hold out a lot of hope for his ability to spark the offense. They need to figure out how to get the ball out of Caleb Williams' hands and him to believe that the play is going to be made. Because when you have DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze out there running routes, you should be able to have a productive passing game.
I am going to take the Packers in this one.
So am I.
Next up, we have the 2-7 Jacksonville Jaguars at the 8-1 Detroit Lions.
One pride, baby.
I waited for it this time, and then I'm like,
I know.
he's not going to do it.
I know. I was like, oh, damn, I forgot.
Jaguars will be without Tank Bigsby this week. Travis Etienne is there. They have Dearness Johnson. How are you feeling about that Jaguars backfield?
So the Jags backfield is kind of game script dependent. Tank Bigsby's he's the 2-down grinder, and he'll catch a pass here or there. But if they're down 14 points, there's nothing to grind. They got to throw the ball.
Just your teeth. That's what they have to grind.
Yeah.
They'll pull the hair out.
And ETN is the more explosive of the two backs. I like Tank Bigsby. It's set up to be a great backfield a la the Detroit Lions with Gibbs and Montgomery. Unfortunately for them, the rest of the offense around them isn't quite up to snuff. You got Evan Ingram, who's probably better than Laporte at this point. But with Mac Jones in there after last week, I'm just not sure there's, I felt I didn't expect Jones to come in and throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, but I didn't expect that last week either.
Yeah.
It's not like he's a rookie that's getting thrown into it. He's been in the league for 4 or 5 years now. And
the Jags just have a bad energy too.
Yeah. It's, it feels like a dead man walking there with Doug Peterson.
Yeah.
And Lawrence just, for whatever reason, hasn't been able to put it together. Brian Thomas has looked good. Losing Christian Kirk, I think, hurts.
They go into a bye after this week, and they're waiting to see if they'll be able to have Trevor Lawrence coming out of that. If not, there are still persistent rumors he could be done for the year, and I don't see a lot of wins for Jacksonville. Meanwhile, for Detroit, Sam Laporta, He's tight at 9 on the season, which you would get excited about, but only averaging 6.1 points per game. Not exactly like what it was last year. In his last 5 games, when they've been pretty hot after the bye, he has 3 games with 10.8 points or more and 2 games with 2.8 points or less. So how are you feeling about Laporta?
Well, I'm not starting him this week since he's out.
Is he out?
But he is.
I didn't see him get ruled out.
Oh, I saw it on Roto World earlier this evening. But with Laporta out, I think there will be a lot of pivot to Brock White for people looking for tight ends. But I think it was somebody from Player Profiler mentioned that they would pivot to Shane Zylstra if you're looking for a Detroit tight end. I think this game, though, I'm going to avoid as much of the passing game as I can, just because I don't expect Jacksonville to put up much of a fight. And so it feels like another 15 pass attempt game for Jared Goff, and then 50 carries for Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. So I still think Laporta is probably the number 2 receiver on that team, but the how far apart him and Jamison Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs are, it's not very far apart. And right now, Laporta is touchdown dependent when he plays.
I am taking the Lions in this one.
As am I.
7-2 Minnesota Vikings at the 2-7 Tennessee Titans. Dennis, how are you feeling about Aaron Jones this week?
Love Aaron Jones this week. Love him every week. He's one of these veterans that changed teams and just kept producing. I think he'll be a solid RB2, even being a little banged up. Against Tennessee, there'll be opportunities, I think, to give him a little bit of a break. But I still think he's going to be good for 15-plus touches, and that should give you RB2 numbers.
Meanwhile, on the other side, Chig Okonkwo, we've liked him the last couple of years. He was kind of a trendy low-end tight end pickup the last few years that you could kind of slot in, had some upside. But this offense has not had a lot of upside in general, and in particular, it's been brutal for Okonkwo, averaging only 2.4 points per game. He's tight end 40 on the season. He has had less than 4 points in 4 of his last 5 games. Is he kind of verging on droppable?
So the best you can say about Chig Okonkwo 2024 season is he's the starter. So Tennessee isn't great, and Mason Rudolph and Will Levis have yet to light up the passing game. When Tennessee is putting up any kind of points, it's typically been Tony Pollard, the guy kind of greasing the wheels. I like Okonkwo's athletic ability, but Brian Callahan comes from the Zach Taylor, Sean McVay tree there. And if you think back, there's not a ton of tight end production. And so I think Okonkwo is just in a situation where he's going to continue to start. He's going to play a lot of snaps. And if you're desperately starting him, you're just hoping he gets a touchdown to go along with his 2 catches and 19 yards.
Tight end has been kind of a tough position lately. Although my averages that I was looking at, I realized I forgot to switch. Yep, I just realized I forgot to look at PPR. Hey, you know what? Sometimes I was like, God, these are low. I didn't realize tight end sucked. It doesn't do a ton for, although it does drop Laporta out of top 10.
He's tight end. Okonkwo's tight end 35 with 4.7 points per game.
Yeah, 4.7 points per game. But some of these numbers look a little more palatable. I was like, I did not remember him having a game with negative points. It happens. I am taking the Vikings.
So am I.
Next up, 2-7 Las Vegas Raiders at the 3-6 Miami Dolphins. Just a barn burner of a contest. Dennis, the Raiders offense, mostly a dumpster fire. They're another team that made a change at offensive coordinator, had a bye week. Don't know what they're doing at quarterback. Their options are washed Gardner Minshew or semi-washed Desmond Ridder. But how are we feeling about our man, Brock Bowers?
They know that job one is to get the ball to Brock Bowers, and Brock Bowers does stuff with the ball when he gets it. He seems to be matchup proof, quarterback proof. We've had some really good tight ends come out in the last few years, and I don't know. I think it may be safe to say Bowers is the best of them.
Yeah,
and it's terrible that he landed in the situation he did, but hopefully that gets rectified in this offseason, and he's in a functional offense where he may break tight end scoring if he's in a good offense. So I love Brock Bowers.
Despite having no quarterback, he's tight end too, averaging 14.2 points per game.
Yep. They don't have much. They got Jacoby Myers. I thought Christian Wilkerson was their other starter. I don't know if I still got it up here or not. No,
I think
their other starter at wide receiver with Myers and Tucker. And who?
I think it's DJ Turner.
No, Turner at the latest Arlad's depth chart I looked at, Turner was backing up Tucker and some cat that I never heard of.
It could be Jalen Guyton.
Ramel Keaton. Ramel Keaton is listed as the third starting wide receiver for the Raiders. I was like, man, is that even a real person?
That's a no from me, dog. On the other side, Tyreek Hill, I think he has his quarterback back, but it kind of came out before Monday's game that he has a wrist injury. Didn't have a spectacular game, that he did get the touchdown. This week, he said they told him he needed surgery, but he decided to play through it. Been some rumblings lately. He's tying it back to his incident with the police that didn't go well for the police. How are we feeling about Tyreek Hill?
Sure would have been nice to know about this wrist thing a little sooner. Yeah. But unfortunately, with Tua being out for those weeks, I don't think it would have mattered if we knew anyways. I mean, it was just not a great situation. I think the offense is starting to shape up a little bit, but what's happening is the offense is starting to run through Devin Achane. And I was listening to Joe Dolan on Sirius XM, and he was talking about how crazy it was to look at the stat where they have a stat for first read targets. So what percentage of targets are you the first read on any given drop back? And that Devin Achane leads the team in first read targets over Tyreek, over Jalen Waddle. I don't know I think it might have just been for that game or for a couple games. But the offense is running through Achane right now, and that's going to be an issue unless they start producing at the level we thought they could. We expected them to be a very explosive offense with Hill and Waddle and Mostert and Achane. But now it just seems like Jonnu Smith is coming in there and stealing all the glory.
Apparently Arthur Smith moved down to Miami as well, moonlighting, sending his playbook. I'm taking the Dolphins.
I am too.
Next up, another barn burner of this one, the 4-5 Los Angeles Rams at the 3-7 New England Patriots. I had jumped down to the next one, which will be a barn burner. There are some incredible games this week, and there are some
incredibly bad games this week.
Yeah. Dennis, last week, Davis Allen seemingly getting involved there, saw 6 targets, caught 5 passes. Any interest in him in a shallow tight end landscape?
Not really. I mean, it's the McVay offense, as I referenced it earlier, talking about Brian Callahan. Since who was the cat? Not Hunter Henry. Who's their tight end that's injured? Tyler Higbee. since he's went out, and even he wasn't super consistent with his production, the Rams are three guys. It's Cooper Kupp, it's Puka Nacua, and it's Kyron Williams. Occasionally somebody accidentally does something, but it's those three guys. They are getting 70% of the volume, and they're all producing at a level which makes Sean McVay go, look, man, I'm smart, and this is how it's going to be. And Davis Allen wasn't a great athletic prospect coming out. He's kind of a big lumbering guy. And so there's going to be some times where he might catch a touchdown here or there, but the volume is just not going to be consistent. He's in that category of tight ends where you're like, I need to pick somebody that I hope falls into the end zone and gets me 7 points because it's a PPR.
Meanwhile, for the New England Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson still probably their most steady skill position player. He's up to running back 21 on the season. How are you feeling about Ramondre?
I think that's really, really nice value for him right now, given how bad that team is. It's good from an NFL perspective. He's playing good enough that he takes some pressure off of Drake May. May doesn't have to put the team on his shoulders and try to carry it. He's got some young receivers that are starting to play well, and Pop Douglas and Kayshon Boutte. And then he's got steady Hunter Henry up there. And so that does leave Ramondre Stevenson with a majority of the RB opportunities. Every now and again, Antonio Gibson will pop in there and, do a little something. But as the offense gets better and performs better, Stevenson will play a little better. So when Drake May has a good game, I think it bodes well for Ramondre Stevenson because it eases up on the run defense. They have issues with their offensive line. That's not going to get solved at this point in the year. But Ramondre is good in the pass game. They just got to remember to use him in that aspect of the game. And he's a very good running back.
I am going to take the Rams in this one.
I'm going to go with the Patriots. I know the Rams are kind of middle of the pack in fantasy points and rush yards to running backs, but I feel good about Ramondre this week.
Next up, the 2-7 Cleveland Browns at the 3-7 New Orleans Saints. Dennis, we are excited that Nick Chubb came back, but in the 3 weeks he's been back, averaging just 6.6 fantasy points per game. Not an incredible matchup with the Saints front. How are you feeling about Nick Chubb?
What I'm hoping is that, this volume of a football game turns into an ambient of a football game because Jameis Winston just starts doing crazy stuff throwing the ball. Chubb is 36%, 59%, and 35% of the snaps in his last 3 games. They've always put him in a position to share because they don't believe in his ability to catch the ball consistently. And I think that you need to use him like they do Derrick Henry in the run game. Give him 4 or 5 targets. He'll be productive with it. You don't need him to run a sophisticated route tree to throw him the ball once in a while. His hands are decent enough. But he also is coming off that injury, and I think our expectations have been tempered over just like how much explosion he's going to have coming back from that, how much burst and cutting ability he's going to have while he regains faith in that knee and kind of just gets everything back up to speed. And he's almost 29 years old. He's 28 years old. There's that running back age cliff that's sitting there. And honestly, if this is as good as he is the rest of his career, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised because, he's a 28-year-old running back and that's what happens. But also if he comes back and is good for 2 or 3 more years, we're not going to be surprised either because we're all going to be like, well, what'd you expect? That was Nick Chubb. So he can't really lose the expectations game. And Cleveland is kind of in disarray this year with everything. I feel bad for the defense because it's pretty good, but Chubb is he'll probably be in the 14 or 15 carry range, maybe 2 targets. If you're starting him, you're hoping he's flex worthy.
Meanwhile, for the Saints, are you going to take a shot on MVS this week?
I mean, I did pick him up in a couple spots. It's one of those, like, who the hell else are they going to throw the ball to? I've got in the Scott Fish Bowl, I am debating between MVS and Mason Tipton. Just MVS. Like which one? And really, the thing is if Tipton gets 5 targets and catches 5 targets, what's the ceiling look like for him? 50 yards, maybe a touchdown. If MVS gets 3 targets and catches 3 targets, what's the ceiling for him? 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. I'm trying to get my 13th win to secure a playoff spot. I've been sitting at 12 wins for 2 weeks now. I'm kicking myself because I had the chance to sit Devonta Smith last night, and I didn't. So, anyways, you roll out MVS is like Gabe Davis. You roll him out knowing you could get 0 or you could get 15, and you have to be ready for it. New Orleans doesn't have a lot of options outside of Alvin Kamara and Taysom Hill, and so I think if you're looking for upside, he's a guy you're going to put in your lineup.
Yep, I'm going to take the Saints in this one.
I tried to find every justification to take the Browns, but I'm taking the Saints.
4-6 Indianapolis Colts at the 3-7 New York Jets. The Colts going back to Anthony Richardson for the rest of the season. What are you expecting?
I'd like to expect that he's going to improve upon that 44% completion rate. But
I'd like to.
I mean, I've got Michael Pittman in one league and I'm benching him.
Yeah.
I might, if I had to choose between Pittman and MVS right now, I might take MVS over Pittman just for the upside, because the upside in Indianapolis is Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell, so I want to believe in Richardson. He needs the reps, but I think we're looking at the downside is that he hasn't been running, and I think he's been overthinking trying to be a passer, and he's not playing natural. I mean, he's 6'5", 245. I think just go out there and play your game. He's not super accurate. I do think he's more accurate than 44%. So if he can get that up to 59%, it may bode well for him to learn into the position. But it's
not a good matchup with the Jets have a better than average defense.
They do. It's going to be
especially against the pass. They've been more sus on the ground.
Right.
Could be a good Jonathan Taylor.
Which if that's the case, that also takes away from Richardson because JT's carrying the ball.
Yeah. Speaking of carrying the ball, how are we feeling about Breece Hall? The Jets offense been in a little bit of a funk. Hall 9.9, 10.5, 12.3 points his last 3 games.
Well, as long as coach and OC Aaron Rodgers doesn't get too squirrely, it should be a really good game for Breece Hall. The Colts are giving up the 2nd most rushing yards and the 12th most receptions to running backs. So this feels like a smash spot for Breece Hall, which means it's going to be 100 yards and 2 touchdowns for Braylon Allen. But it's a good spot. Breece Hall is a really, really good running back, and he should be getting easily the lion's share of the opportunities. And I know you've got Devontae Adams and you've got Garrett Wilson. Let's narrow that funnel down Adams, Wilson, and Hall. Let's score some fantasy points there, Aaron.
I'm taking the Colts in this one.
I'm going Jets. Jets. Jets.
They're just so bad. I can't. I'm out on Aaron Rodgers.
I think they're going to win in spite of him, not because of him.
7-3 Baltimore Ravens at the 7-2 Pittsburgh Steelers. Dennis, we've had a big season from Derrick Henry, but this pretty stout Pittsburgh front. What are you expecting from him this week?
It is stout. The Steelers give up the 5th fewest rushing yards to running backs. They also give up the 2nd fewest rushing yards to quarterbacks. So, Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers, let's go. The thing, it's easy to look at that and be like, oh, it's not gonna go well. The other side of it is, how many times have they played Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry this year? Is this their first game or second?
Yeah, it's their first game, but they've actually historically done pretty well against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens.
But he didn't have Derrick Henry then. So
I mean, they've always had a pretty good running game.
They have. I think it's gonna be a tough battle. I don't think it's gonna be a high scoring game. But I like the Ravens offense. Their defense isn't great. They're going to have to score points, and they've got weapons. Adding Deontay Johnson to Bateman and Zay Flowers. I think Likely is out, but Mark Andrews is I think as good a defense as Pittsburgh has. I don't know that they have a safety that's strong enough to match up with Andrews or a linebacker that's quick enough to match up with Andrews. This could be a return to form for Andrews. And I just think Lamar has been playing better than he was in last year's MVP season. So I'm down.
On the flip side, you mentioned the Ravens defense. They've struggled a little bit at times in the secondary. George Pickens has been heating up. He has 20 or more points in 2 of the 3 starts with Russell Wilson, up to wide receiver 18 on the season. How are you feeling about him?
I love that Pickens is clicking with Russell Wilson. So don't get me wrong. I'm a huge Justin Fields fan. I think his NFL career has basically been a bunch of people trying to make him something he's not, except for Tomlin. I think Tomlin put him in a position to use his skills. The unfortunate thing for him was that they just had a better quarterback in Russell Wilson. That being said, George Pickens was putting up 9.9 fantasy points with Justin Fields. 2 of his 6 games, he had over 74 yards. With Russell Wilson, he's putting up 18 fantasy points a game, and all 3 of his games have been 74 yards or more. It's just a better opportunity for George Pickens. And now with Mike Williams on the other side to be a legitimate threat over there, Freiermuth can do his thing. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. I think it's the offense in Pittsburgh, I think, is going to keep gelling real well. I love Pickens. I think he's a solid wide receiver too for the rest of the year with Russell Wilson.
I am going to take the Steelers.
I'm going Ravens, baby. Lamar Jackson, march to that MVP.
Next up, on to the late window games, the 6-4 Atlanta Falcons at the 5-5 Denver Broncos. Dennis, Drake London is having himself a pretty good season. He is sitting at wide receiver 4 on the season. But going into Denver, he's likely going to be shadowed by Patrick Surtain, and we've seen that not be great for other receivers like Garrett Wilson or DK Metcalf or Mike Evans. So how are you feeling about Drake London?
Well, London's looking like he's healthy, and it's really going to be interesting to see because Denver's going to have to make a decision. Are they going to put Surtain on one guy and
yes,
just
they have been putting Surtain on one guy?
because they got Darnell Mooney, who's wide receiver 7 on the other side.
Yeah, and they'll use Riley Moss and roll the safety onto that side. They have been putting. That's what happened when they played Tampa Bay. He was white on rice on Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin got everybody else.
So it's going to be a challenge. I like Drake London, but I agree with you. I don't know that he's going to put up an elite performance. I think if you roster him, let me ask you this: would you start Drake London over CeeDee Lamb this week?
Probably just because. Well, no, but
for rush
two good wide receivers that'll probably make you cry this week. No, I don't think either's going to be great. I went and looked. So Garrett Wilson had 7 fantasy points the week that they played Denver. Mike Evans had just under 7 points. DK Metcalf had just under 6 fantasy points. So you probably won't get shut out, but
not going to be a big game. Yeah, I like, this could line up to be a Kyle Pitts week. Bijan Robinson has had a really, really good year. And when they need to throw the ball a lot, Robinson's the back they throw the ball to. So if London and Mooney are tying up, 5 guys in the defensive backfield, that may open stuff up for the others. So like I said, where you drafted London, you're probably not with the luxury of sitting him, but you have to temper your expectations.
Yep. For Denver, they, beyond Cortland Sutton, they've been trying to find other receivers. They've been looking and giving a lot of snaps to their rookie wide receivers, Troy Franklin and Devon Vele. We've seen at times some interesting production. How are you feeling about those guys for fantasy?
They're an interesting duo. So Franklin's sitting at wide receiver 99 and Vele at wide receiver 82. Those numbers in and of themselves aren't interesting. Franklin provides a little bit of over-the-top pop to that offense, the challenge being Nix isn't always able to execute that. But Devon Vele has been wide receiver 57 over the last 4 weeks. So he's starting to establish himself kind of as that too. And we'll see if little Jordan Humphrey or with Josh Reynolds coming back from IR, is one of them going to start to be able to push Vele, or is Vele going to be able to hold on to that wide receiver 2 spot? I think the thing I like most about Franklin, that he's done what none of the other wide receivers outside of Cortland Sutton have done. Franklin has scored fantasy points in 8 straight games. So he's getting opportunity. He just needs to earn more opportunity. And I don't know how easy that's going to be with Sean Payton as he kind of tries to establish his 3-headed running back monster.
Yeah, and Josh Reynolds won't get activated this week. Technically, Denver starts little Jordan Humphrey and Marvin Mims.
Right.
And both those guys, but that's why I said technically. I am taking the Broncos.
I'm going to go with the Falcons.
The 4-5 Seattle Seahawks at the 5-4 San Francisco 49ers. Dennis DK Metcalf practicing, will play again after missing a couple weeks and having a bye. How are you feeling about him?
Metcalf has a particular set of skills, and Geno Smith has been able to use him pretty well the last couple of years. He's got 3 top 8 finishes, but he's also finished wide receiver 48 or worse 3 times. He's missed 2 games, so there's been some inconsistency. I think there will be a little bit of, hey, let's get him back involved now that he's back. But I also think that Jackson Smith-Njigba is starting to establish himself as well. Njigba will never be the kind of alpha receiver that DK Metcalf is. I think the two of them can be very, very complementary to each other. it's going to come down to, can the Seattle offensive line keep the rush off of Geno Smith? I'm not 100% sold on that. So while if I have Metcalf, I'm starting Metcalf. I'm also not expecting a top 10 finish out of him.
On the flip side, for the 49ers, we saw Deebo Samuel get a little riled up on the sidelines last week. Haven't seen too many huge performances from him, but how are you feeling about him this week?
Deebo needs to stay off the long snapper's jock and worry about being outside of wide receiver 2 numbers for 5 of the last 6 weeks. Unfortunately, though, that's probably more a function of the offense than anything Deebo's doing. George Kittle has been super hot, and now they got McCaffrey back. Juwan Jennings is back. I like Deebo. I think he's a very talented guy. And in any given week, he can put up 30 points. Is that going to be this week? Maybe.
We shall see. I am taking the 49ers in this one.
So am I.
Next up, probably one of the games of the week, the 9-0 Kansas City Chiefs at the 8-2 Buffalo Bills. They are not bringing Isaiah Pacheco back this week. So what are you doing with this Kansas City backfield?
If I'm still in a league where the trade line has not expired, I'm trying to trade Kareem Hunt. I think he'll be viable for the next couple of weeks. But if I feel strong about my ability to get into the playoffs and have a decent run game without him, I might try to move on. I think he'll be involved when Pacheco gets back. It's just going to be split. They love Pacheco. I think Kareem Hunt kind of moves into the Jerick McKinnon role when Pacheco gets back. And, I don't know, maybe Pacheco moves into the Jerick McKinnon role and we all end up with egg on our face. But Kareem Hunt has been, what is he? He's been a top 11 running back in 4 of the last 5 games. That's worth something. And I could see you saying, no, I'm not going to trade him. I know Pacheco's coming back, but I'm going to keep riding Kareem Hunt and taking the production. Despite it being not super efficient, it's been good enough to be an RB1 4 or 5 weeks. So he's still a good back.
Meanwhile, for Buffalo, no Dalton Kincaid this week, no Keon Coleman either, but Amari Cooper is tracking toward playing. How are you feeling about these Bills pass catchers?
I'm starting with Khalil Shakir. That's the guy I want. I think he's the most consistent, and I know with Kincaid out, it's easy to get jazzed about Dawson Knox, but with Cooper healthy enough to play, Curtis Samuel's a dart. Mac Hollins is a dart. I think they're going to want to get Cooper involved more, kind of show, look, he came in, he played a couple games with mixed results. Now he knows the offense a little better. Let's show you what we can really do with him. But Khalil Shakir is the guy I want. I think you're muted.
I am taking the Buffalo Bills.
I'm undecided. I'm going to stick with the Chiefs. I think they're going to keep rolling towards their undefeated season.
We have a lot of differences this week. Usually we've been almost all lockstep, so somebody's going to be happy and somebody's going to be very sad. Sunday Night Football, they flex this one in, the 4-6 Cincinnati Bengals at the 6-3 Los Angeles Chargers. Dennis Chase Brown has been on fire the last 2 weeks, 20-plus points in each. How are you feeling about him going into Sunday Night Football?
He's RB4 since week 4. I know they went out and got Khalil Herbert at the trade deadline because they didn't like any of the other running backs that they had.
And they brought in Leonard Fournette.
Yeah. Well, he's more of a tight end.
Touchdown, Lenny.
I think they recognize that they can't continue to use Chase Brown in that bell cow role But I also think they look at it and go, who the hell else do we have? And they look out to, Zach Taylor come from the Sean McVay tree, and he looks out there and sees McVay with 199-pound Kyron Williams and goes, you know what? If he can do it, I can do it. So I think right now you keep riding Chase Brown until he breaks, and then you deal with that when that happens. But you keep slotting him in there as your RB1, and let's roll, buddy.
Meanwhile, for the Chargers, Justin Herbert, it was a little bit of a slow start to the season, but since they came back from their bye in week 6, he is QB8, averaging 18 points per game. How are you feeling about Justin Herbert?
We all thought he was a good quarterback, and we were nervous about Greg Roman coming in and Jim Harbaugh, and we want to grind the ball with our running backs, but I think it looks like they're smart enough to recognize we got a 6'6" quarterback that can sling the ball. We let all of his best wide receivers walk, but Josh Palmer's healthy and playing well. Jim Harbaugh seems to have unlocked something with Quentin Johnston. Still not as consistent as you'd like to be, but he's playing well and he's explosive. Will Dissly's playing good at the tight end position. And now they've got Gus Edwards back, so you never know who's going to be running the ball, but somebody's going to run the ball there. Usually it's J.K. Dobbins getting the volume and the passing game, but Edwards gets enough now that unless Dobbins is super efficient, he's hampered. So I think it's, if you were able to trade for Justin Herbert a few weeks ago, when maybe people thought the production was fluky, you're sitting pretty.
I am taking the Chargers.
I'm going Bengals.
It's going to be a fun win. The 6-4 Houston Texans at the 3-6.
And that one truly is against my better judgment with that Bengals defense.
Monday Night Football, the 6-4 Houston Texans at the 3-6 Dallas Cowboys. A battle for Texas, I guess. Nico Collins going to play this week. Finally back. When he went out after week 5, he was wide receiver 2 on the season, averaging more than 21 points per game. Dallas has not been exceptional. How are you feeling about Nico Collins?
Love Nico Collins. I think he's going to pick up where he left off. I'd have been a little more concerned last week if they had tried to push him in, but I like that they waited another week. He clicks with CJ Stroud. I think that makes things better for Tank Dell. Joe Mixon has been grinding. Speaking of inefficiency, but man, he's just taking the volume and he's doing what he needs to do. He's getting tough yards. I don't think they can have a whole lot more of those. What did he have last week? 16, 18 carries for 1.8 yards a carry. I don't think they're going to go with that for a whole lot, but Nico Collins, what?
He still had good fantasy points.
He did. He scores touchdowns, catches some passes. Nico Collins is the man in that offense, though, and I think CJ Stroud's going to be happy to have him back, and I think he puts up some good numbers.
Well, and Dallas' defense is kind of a rumor. So, speaking of Dallas, Cooper Rush was the opposite of a rush last week. He only had 45 passing yards. They got 21 more from Trey Lance, which, if my math is correct, still leaves us quite a bit shy of 80. CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson, we love them in fantasy, but combined last week, they only had 12.8 fantasy points. How are we feeling about them this week?
I mean, it can't get worse, can it?
Hold my beer.
So Lamb he's wide receiver 5 on the year. He was wide receiver 40 last week. Ferguson's tight end 15, and he was tight end 26 in week 10. So Ferguson hasn't been as productive. Lamb's week would have been, I don't know if salvaged is the right word, but it would have been better had he caught that touchdown in the sun. But he didn't, and, coulda, woulda, shoulda. When Rush started 5 games a couple years ago, Lamb was wide receiver 9. Different offensive coordinator at that point. I'm not sure what Schottenheimer and McCarthy are going to do, but I'd like to think they're smart enough to figure out how to keep Cooper Rush upright long enough to get CeeDee Lamb the ball, because that's literally the only chance they have of winning any game, let alone this game. But I'm not holding out hope. I think CD will be better than he was last week. So maybe he's a wide receiver 3, maybe he's a low end 2. But yeah, it did not look great, Bob.
Tough times. I am taking the Texans, and I defy you to go against me on this one.
Not a chance. Texans for me, man.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. That is the Week 11 slate. There are some diamond games, and there are some rough games. So hopefully you get some diamonds.
There's some diamond games, and there's some coal games.
Yeah. I am. It does look like the predominant national doubleheader for CBS is going to be Ravens Steelers chased by Chiefs Bills. So that would be a pretty exceptional doubleheader. And Sunday night football will be okay. Monday night football, they did not. It looked good on paper in September, but not now. Dennis, if people have some free time tomorrow and they're just pining away, waiting for games to begin, what can they do?
Well, they can head on over to their favorite podcast platform, hit that search bar, type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Hey, I don't know if you guys know this, but we both have popped up over on the Blue Sky social media network. We just got to figure out how to create the show handle over there, and we'll get that so we can share the show over there. If you're looking for us, reach out, say hi, give us a follow. We'll talk fantasy football there too.
Well, that'll do it for us today. We'll be back on Tuesday. Try to determine whether Dennis. We'll probably split these games, so neither of us will be too.
Neither of us will be happy.
But we will see how all that goes. Hope you have a great weekend and a great week in fantasy. We will see you guys on Tuesday.